Good morning, church, and welcome to day 20 of our 40 days of prayer challenge. It's the halfway mark. And the halfway mark in any challenge is always a really good opportunity to pause and reflect and to look back and see how things have changed, what God has been saying, if your prayers have been answered. It's a really amazing faith boosting activity to look back and see what God has done. And if you're not journaling, I encourage you to journal. I've been journaling during these last 20 days, and I have been so blessed looking back and seeing what God has done over the past 20 days. And this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about faith. The word faith can have such interesting personal interpretation with people. But when we look at the word, one of the most sort of widely talked about components of faith is that it needs to be followed by action. James chapter 2 verse 26 says, "For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead." Abraham is considered by many to be the father of modern faith. And in Hebrews 11, the writer is stirring up the faith of the early church by calling to memory the faith of Abraham. It says in verse 8 of Hebrews 11, "By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going." Abraham may not have known his final destination, but that didn't stop him from taking the first step on his journey. Maybe during this prayer time, God has been speaking to you. I know he's been speaking to me about something that I need to do. And maybe we are afraid to put feet to our faith. This doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us human. Because as humans, we like to know the 25-year plan, or exactly what's going to happen and exactly how we're going to get to a destination before we take that first step to get there. I know I do. I'll be the first to put up my hand, and I'm sure I've got some friends out there. But that's not how God works. God gives us just enough mercy, just enough revelation, just enough strength for each step of the journey. He does that so that we live in daily dependence on him. He doesn't want us to rely on the knowledge of the revelation. He wants us to rely on him, because God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He will give us and equip us with what we need for the journey as we take a step out in faith and start moving. Some people spend their whole lives getting ready and waiting in faith for what God wants them to do, but they never end up doing anything. And often the reason is something we've all heard and no doubt all said at some point in our lives, and that is, "I'm not ready." But we need to accept that we're never actually going to be ready. This is where so many of us get stuck, because our failure to act on what God is calling us to do not only breeds doubt and disappointment and discouragement, but it's actually also a form of disobedience. We will never be ready to get married or start a family or start a business. We will never be ready financially, spiritually, or emotionally. And we will never have enough faith, enough cash, or enough courage. But if we're looking for excuses, we will always find them. But I want to encourage you this morning, church, to let's not wait until we feel ready to move on something that God wants us to do. Otherwise, we're probably going to be waiting for the rest of our lives. As followers of Christ, we're called to take a sort of why not approach to life, an approach to live in a way that dares to dream, an approach that demands action, and it doesn't look for excuses not to do something. We need to understand that we are called by God, and He's calling us to devote our lives to the service of the kingdom. There are always going to be moments in life where seeking God in prayer is going to lead us to having to make a decision, to step out and put feet to our faith. Maybe it's time to quit that job that you know is not where God wants you, or end that relationship that you know is not honoring God. Or maybe it's calling that person who you may have hurt and asking for their forgiveness. Or maybe God is asking you to step out in your finances and find ways to be more generous. Whatever it is, be encouraged today to take that first step like Abraham did, who, without knowing where he was going, took the first step into all God had for him. Let's be obedient with the amount of revelation that God has given us right now. And I can tell you with bold assurance that as we take that first step, God will honor our faith just as He did with Abraham. God bless you, church.